Howdy, guys. Jimmy Song here, and welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Tech Talk, where we talk about the week's news as put out in my newsletter that I send out every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time. Anyway, got a lot of news this week, especially with respect to Lightning that I want to cover. And then at the end of the show, towards the end of the show, I'll go through my tweets and sort of explain some of them if they didn't make sense to you or something like that. Anyway. It's there. Let's get started right away. Let's take a look at the newsletter. We had 7 stories this week. But before I get to that, let's shill a couple of things. We have the Little Bitcoin book, Why Bitcoin Matters for Your Freedom, Your Finances and Future. It is available on paperback, and we now have 40 ratings. Wow. And they are all almost universally really, really good. Very well written book. I should click helpful for all of these. Anyway, yeah, so that's the paperback. We also have this book available now in Spanish. So it's El Pequeño Libro de Bitcoin. And it is available in Spanish just like before. Yeah. So, we don't really have any reviews yet. So if you are interested in the Spanish version, you can go get it on Amazon as well. And of course, I have my other book, Programming Bitcoin, which is available also on Amazon. This also is $41, and it's available on paperback. I am, of course, the author. This book is also available in Korean if you are interested. You're going to have to go search for it on a Korean language website in order to get it. I will be in Korea in early December, and that's something that we're going to promote once I'm there. I'm really excited. Like as an author, it's gratifying to see your work be read. It's even more gratifying to see it read by people that don't even know your language. So really cool stuff. I do have a seminar this week, but I didn't put it into the newsletter because I didn't want it to get stale. But yeah, it's in San Francisco, 5th and 6th. Scholarship winners have already been announced and so on. But yeah, if absolutely last minute you want to get into the seminar, please let me know. You're going to have to do that. All right. Let's take a look at some of this stuff. Let's look at the first story. This is the cold card hardware details. So this is from CoinKite. They actually gave the entire schematic and bill of materials, for Cold Card Mark III, which is absolutely crazy. I can't believe they're giving this away, but this is in the spirit of open source and so on, and all of the different this is a schematic, but you can also go and get the bill of materials, including what you need to put it together. You can essentially solder your own cold card, put in their open source firmware, and make your own cold card if you especially don't trust any of the manufacturing processes. So I think good on them for publishing all of it. If I knew more about hardware, I would totally be studying this and trying to figure out if there's something I can do to make it. But good job, Rodolfo and everybody else at CoinKite. Here is the second story, running LND alongside Bitcoin D on Android. So this is a really interesting project. Basically, they took Bitcoin D and LND and created a way to run it all on Android. So if your phone has enough memory, enough hard drive space and bandwidth and so on, you can essentially run a full node on your phone. Now, I mean, this isn't the first one to do it. I think Exodus phone has something like that. But this is the first one where it's open source. And in fact, the next link is exactly, well, actually, I didn't put that into the newsletter, but it is available right here. You can go and get the wallet and like play with it and have a full node running on your phone. Of course, you're going to need a lot of memory. I think full node is close to 200 gigabytes these days. So you're not many phones have that. Although we're getting to the point where that stuff is a lot more common than it used to be. So something to think about. And if you want to run a full node on a phone, I mean, it may be something that's doable now. All right. Blockchain versus Bitcoin. So this is from Rhythm Trader on Twitter. I love his tweets. Definitely knows what he's talking about. It seems to have a very quotable set of tweets. Always enjoy them. Anyway, this is his first article and very interesting. Talking about how blockchain is kind of like a censored keyword, or Bitcoin is the censored keyword, and people instead used the word blockchain instead. It's kind of a long article, but very well thought out and very good. Encourage you guys to read it as well. A lot of Lightning news this week. Lightning Rod. This is an interesting technology from Breeze, and if you know about Breeze, they probably have the most usable light wallet for the Lightning Network, in large part because they open $100 worth of inbound liquidity as soon as you download the wallet, which is very useful, especially if you're getting paid. And that's sort of the hard thing about Lightning right now. But Breeze has more or less solved that by essentially providing a massive amount of liquidity onto their platform. Anyway, part of this is, part of what kind of sucks about Lightning is that you both have to be online, right? In order to pay somebody, you both have to be online at the same time, which might be fine if you're doing an in-person transaction or something like that. You can make sure that both people are connected and waiting and so on. But that's not always the case, especially if you want to do like automated payments or something like that. If, for some of the use cases that we've been dreaming of, like, machine-to-machine payments and so on, might not be online, might be online, who knows. This is where Lightning Rod comes in, and it's essentially a way to do asynchronous payments via Lightning. And this is pretty big because one of the weaknesses of Lightning is that you do have to have not only your node, but all of the routing nodes in between be online at the same time. Being able to do it asynchronously means that, you can just sort of send, and then the other one, it can be more like email instead of like a chat or something like that. And that's huge. That makes it a lot better. And the analogy that they make is, you're basically using some sort of like television on demand instead of having to tune in at 8:00, which is great. And they go through exactly how it works. I encourage you to read that. But the actual specification and the Lightning Rod protocol is published here. And this is Breeze Lightning Rod, and they have all of the definitions and all of the specifications for making this all there. So cool stuff. I would encourage you to take a look at it. All right, this is probably one of the coolest applications of the Lightning Network that I've seen, and this is called Whatsat, and basically it's kind of like a play on WhatsApp, which is a popular chat or messaging app on Android and iOS and so on. But essentially, what it's doing is it's using the Lightning Network as the way to communicate between two nodes. And it's absolutely amazing what you can do with the infrastructure that's being built. And this is sort of, you can think of this as like a chat protocol on top of the Lightning Network. And you can, and it's more or less a proof of concept using, terminal and so on. But it's absolutely mind-blowing that you can do something like this and have a a true end-to-end encrypted peer-to-peer sort of anonymous chatting with all of the authentication and so on that you can have all just sort of running on top of the Lightning Network, and that's what this is. And really cool stuff. If you're interested at all, I think it's mostly written in Go, and I think it's a modification of LND actually. Yeah. So I believe it's very readable and kind of fun to play with. The fact that you could sort of chat without having to go to, like, being able to pay somebody in Bitcoin without having to go to like a secondary app and back and forth and so on is it's a problem if you've ever done any transactions online. This can definitely solve that. So good on them. Really cool stuff. All right. Polar. So this is more for developers, but essentially this is a way to just throw up a mini Lightning network for testing. And it's kind of beta right now, and you have to install Docker and do all this other stuff. But it's a much needed tool, because a lot of what the Lightning Network requires is for you to figure out like a lot of the routing and things like that, and being able to spin up a bunch of nodes that are connected in some way, without having to do all of the scaffolding and setting it up. Having it all sort of done for you can be a real time saver. And if you are a Lightning developer, this is definitely something that you should take a look at and play with. All right. So that's about it for the stories this week. The main things are, Lightning Rod is huge. You can run a full node on Android using the binaries on there and so on. Let's see if there are any questions. I think Song is the sixth most popular last name in Korea or something like that. So there's a decent chance that I'm related, but I don't know that they. I mean, come on, man. I'm Asian. All right, let's take a look at my tweets from the past week, and I'll try to go ahead and explain them. All right, I've had a bunch of them. All right, all right, so here is the link for translation of programming Bitcoin in Korean. Here's what it looks like. It's got everything on there, and my Korean name is on there. You can see it, which is great. Hanbit Media, I guess, is my publisher in Korea, so happy about that. All right, so let's take a look at this one. The Keynesian mentality is to identify with what we consume. Crypto Keynesianism is essentially focused on consuming tokens. Utility tokens and fast transaction tokens are what result. Not very popular, but essentially I'm trying to explain here the Keynesian mentality of just sort of consuming. And this is a big difference between Keynesian economics and Austrian economics. Keynesian thinks it's sort of like consumption is everything. Austrian is much more about savings and capital accumulation and building products that people want and that contribute to overall efficiency and so on. But the Keynesian mentality is to look at aggregate numbers, especially aggregate statistics like how much has been consumed in this past year or something like that by a particular country, consumer spending and things like that. And when you apply that sort of theory of economics to crypto, what you end up getting are essentially what we have now in our ecosystem, which is like ICOs and lots of people doing like consuming tokens, and it's all based on like the velocity of money, right? Like how much it's going through the system rather than the value added. And like that, and it's a very different mentality. And sadly, that's the sink that a lot of people have gone into is from learning Keynesian economics, probably from their macroeconomics class in college or something like that. This is what they think will be successful. All of them have obviously failed. Most of them have very little of an ecosystem beyond the people that hold the tokens in the first place. So that's what I was trying to convey. Obviously, it wasn't a very popular tweet, so sorry. All right. You can ask permission. Oh, gosh, I hate these people that like spam my feed. You can ask permission or blaze a trail. Authorities want you to ask permission. That is the nanny state at work. Blaze a trail, take calculated risks, and be ethical. That is the way of Bitcoin. Now, It's based on it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. The thing is, like, the act of asking for permission assumes that there's an authority, and that rankles me a little bit. That you need to ask for permission to do almost anything. That you need to ask permission to the state to get married, for example. That's what business is it of theirs, right? Like, if it's a contract that I want to make with somebody, I mean, about the only part that the state plays in it is if something should go wrong with that contract, then they can be the adjudicator or something like that. But even there, like, there are third party mediation services that, and I don't necessarily trust the government to do that. But it's the mentality that we're all under, that we need to ask for permission from an authority to do X, Y, or Z. And my tweet here is basically saying, go do your own thing. Go do your own thing. And that's don't necessarily ask for permission. Now, if you're doing your own thing and you're being unethical, then you end up like just going robbing people or stealing from people or something like that, and that's very unethical. I don't think you should do that. But like, you don't need to ask for permission, right? Like, it's and a lot of these permission systems, authority centralized systems, result as come into being as a result of too many people being unethical, and this is a way to sort of enforce a particular form of morality onto the populace. I mean, there's good and bad in that, but it can obviously be taken too far, and I think the nanny state that we live under definitely has, and that's what I was pointing out. It's, if you blaze your own trail, first of all, it's a lot more satisfying, and second, it's probably going to make you a lot more money because you're able to capture a lot of the value. All right. This was a response to Paul Graham's tweet. The web is 25 years old. Signing up and paying for things is still broken. Why do you have to create an account and make up a password? Why do you have to type a number off a card on your pocket? There's a big opportunity here that will seem obvious in retrospect. Here's the reason why all of them do that. Fraud. Credit card fraud in particular is a major problem for everybody. Why? Because essentially your private key is printed on the thing and you transmit it every time you do any transaction on there. And of course, they keep your private key as a way of to make it convenient for you and so on. But that's the reason why they make you sign up at an address and put all this identifying information up there in the first place in case you do fraud. They want to catch you and do something. Now, if like the rest of us kind of have to pay that tax of fraud, essentially. But here's the solution: use Bitcoin. Right? It's a bearer instrument. You don't have to worry about chargebacks and so on. It's just that not enough merchants recognize the benefits of it, and they're not taking it exclusively, which is what they would do if they really recognize the benefits. They sales and revenue numbers are much more important to them, so that's the direction that they're going in. But somebody somewhere will come up with products that are so good, and they're going to say, well, you know what? Instead of increasing sales, I'd rather get the most secure money and the best money that I can, and I'm only going to allow you to pay for it in Bitcoin. There are already a bunch of places that do that already. If you run afoul of the banking system and you still have a product that people want, you're probably selling it for Bitcoin at this point anyway. So though Paul Graham doesn't realize it, it's already here. It's just, that's the opportunity's already been there. Unpopular opinion: charities will get less money as Bitcoin adoption increases. I need to explain this a little bit because charities currently get a lot of money, and a lot of it honestly comes from public coffers, right? Like the city of San Francisco, I think, donates to hundreds of charities and doesn't expect any sort of measurement of their effectiveness. This happens, at the state level, at the federal government level. A lot of charities get a lot of money from government. So that's one way in which charities will get less money. But more than that, fiat money is always kind of expanding, and that money needs to go somewhere. And in order to sort of whitewash a lot of the money that's coming in, a lot of people just sort of give to charity as a way to whitewash their guilt from, essentially rent-seeking off the government fiat that they're getting. So in a way, once you turn off the spigot of fiat money, I think what ends up happening is that charities will just end up getting less money. And they'll have to prove more effectiveness and so on. And I think that's a good thing. Instead of just sort of giving money to whoever's asking for it, people will be much more, like tight-gripped with their Bitcoins and demand more actual good to come out of it. And honestly, there's a lot of rent seeking in the charity space as well, and getting rid of that wouldn't be a bad thing. Instead of people rent seeking and like making money off of people trying to whitewash their guilt, you'll have more effective actual charitable actions that are happening. And more than that, besides charities, I think there will be a lot more direct help. So instead of having to go through a government in order to give aid to somebody in a oppressed country, I think much more will happen sort of at a local level, right? Like if you're giving money to somebody that's in need in Libya or something like that, you could do that directly instead of having to go through the banking system, which inevitably has a choke point at the place that the people need help. So, that's just my opinion, and yeah, we'll see what happens. All right. Here is another one. Bitcoin has benefited significantly via negativa. Mt. Gox, people leaving to start their own alts, BCH 2X. What else could Bitcoin do away with? Now, if you're not familiar with the whole via negativa concept, it's that you gain by cutting things out. And the Bitcoin ecosystem has benefited greatly from cutting out some of these things, like Mt. Gox. It was an exchange that was completely insecure, had somebody at the helm that didn't really know how to scale their business and so on. Them going bankrupt was a very good thing for the ecosystem. Similarly, a lot of people starting, sort of leaving to start their own alts. A lot of scams have left Bitcoin essentially, and that's a very good thing as well. BCH, a lot of the people that were belly aching about, larger block sizes and so on, those people have left. That's a very good thing. 2X, there's a lot of companies that have that tried to take over Bitcoin, and because they couldn't, they're now pumping BCH or trying to get back in the good graces of Bitcoiners or whatever. But essentially, they're kind of cut out from the community in many ways, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That means that newer, better products are coming onto the market. Better businesses are coming onto the market. I mean, BTC Pay, for example, was a direct response to BitPay's, treachery. So, these are things that are helping Bitcoin. And my question was, what else could Bitcoin do away with? And it's an open question. I got some interesting answers. We'll see what happens. But that's a way to view the world that might be interesting. Be grateful for the Bitcoin you have. Bitcoin is not an entitlement and never will be. It's not an entitlement. That's essentially it. A lot of people seem to think that universal basic income or something like that, it's an entitlement, and that you need to do something in order to. You don't need to do anything to earn stuff. Bitcoin is not an entitlement. It's actually truly scarce. The thing about making something not scarce is that this entitlement mindset quickly comes into play, and this is the result is a welfare state essentially, which is what we have in the United States and in a lot of the Western world, is that a lot of people feel entitled to a lot of things that they. Like why should we give you lots of money for this stuff? It sucks that you don't have food, but it also makes perverse incentives or whatever. And this is essentially what I'm arguing with a really scarce asset like Bitcoin. Now, it's not going to be an entitlement, and the Bitcoin that you do receive, you're going to be very grateful about. And that's the opposite of entitlement, honestly, is receiving something and being grateful for it. All right, let's see. I think this may have been my most popular tweet this week. My new Bitcoin investment advice: don't buy until you understand what it is. Question isn't, should I buy X? The question is, do I understand X? Don't spray and pray, do your own research. A lot of people get into crypto and then they just buy like 30 or 40 different kind of things, and then they go, okay, well, we'll see what happens, and they think they're geniuses because a couple of them go up in value or something like that. That's not what it is that you're doing. You're just gambling. And my tweet here is basically saying, don't buy until you understand what it is, and don't buy Bitcoin until you understand what it is. Previously, my advice was, if you're going to hold for 5 years, then go for it. If not, then don't bother. I think this is better advice in the sense that you need to understand what it is that you're investing in. It's something that you're going to be holding for a long time. It's going to be in your possession for a while, and it's going to be a part of you in a way. And that, like, spray and pray is gambling, but doing your own research and getting the thing that you want and that you believe in, that's actual investment, and that's what I'm encouraging people to do here. All right, let's see. Bitcoin. Oh, your code speaks so loud I can't hear what you say. Just, a lot of terrible code out there in the altcoin world, and whatever they say about their future prospects or whatever, we're gonna bring this into being and this into being. The code speaks louder than their promises, and this is especially true of projects like Ethereum or Bitcoin Gold or any stupid fork or whatever. This one, what are some tells for how much someone cares about the future? For me, number of children, spending habits, and diet. Well, it's just sort of a question that I put out there, and none of these are sort of like sufficient in of themselves. But again, this is kind of like a tell, right? Like, you might be wrong on the tell, but it's at least an indicator that they're doing something that goes in that direction. Now, for me, like, spending habits and diet are pretty self-explanatory. If you care about the future, you're not going to be eating Twinkies, right? Like, you're not going to be eating donuts, like, at least very often. It's mostly because you care about your long-term health, and you know that sugar is terrible for you, and that it'll eventually cause metabolic syndrome and stuff like that. But spending habits are another one, right? Like, are you do you have low time preference or high time preference? Are you going to buy something that makes you happy now, or are you saving for later? So those two are definitely two of them. Number of children, I think I got a little bit of flack for that, but basically, if you have children at all, that's indicative of you planning ahead, because having children is not easy. I can tell you that for certain, having raising some right now. Like, it's not easy because they require a lot of resources, a lot of your time, and so on. But at the same time, they have a really good payoff. You have relationships with people that are related to you. You have genes that you're passing on. You're leaving a legacy that's going to live on in a fleshly form. And you have the potential for grandkids and so on. So for me, that's indicative of children, of caring about the future. Like, how much of are you invested in the future is whether or not you have children, number one, and the number of children you have. The more you have, the more invested you are in the future. All right, let's see. What's been the most helpful for you to understand something complex? Examples: YouTube videos, books, articles, talking to someone, formal classroom. Most people seem to say like it's some combination, but yeah, I mean, it really depends, I think. I mean, understanding something complex is very, very difficult. So yeah, it baffles me how many Bitcoin apostates continue to wallow in their idiocy. Being wrong is not the same as being weak. Being stubborn is not the same thing as being strong. Instead of mental gymnastics, I wish they would engage in humble self-reflection. And this is the sad reality, is that a lot of people leave Bitcoin sort of in a huff with pride and so on, and they refuse to admit that they were wrong. And once you're sort of excommunicated from the Bitcoin community, the only thing that will get you back is sort of humble self-reflection and saying, you know what, I was wrong about this, right? Like, and I think of people like Jeff Garzik or Mike Hearn or Gavin Andreessen, or even like Roger Ver and many others, and they are sort of wrapped in a cycle of pride, and they can't come to admit that they were wrong about something, and that's a sad reality. And I wish, instead of engaging in mental gymnastics about how Bitcoin was wrong all along and that they were right, that they would actually reflect on what the actual reality of the situation is. All right. Let's take a look at the Sunday survey. How many siblings do you have? Didn't get that many votes. It's probably not as popular, but I like learning about the demographics of the people that I'm of my audience and so on. Instead of figuring out a thorny problem of getting, finding, or even measuring the consent of the governed, Bitcoin does away with governance altogether. And this has been something that I've been saying for a long time now, which is that governance is really about government, right? Centralization, and Bitcoin doesn't have a center, and that's the strength, and also it's the thing that makes it so frustrating for almost anybody that wants to create a better version, is that decentralization is not easy and you can't do it. So essentially, they end up having to have their own governance, and that almost always ends up becoming like just a single benevolent dictator for life, which is you're back to fiat at that point. All right, if you own any ETH, you're trusting this guy. Remember proof of stake? Remember code is law? He lies like a politician. Oh, wait, that's exactly what it is. Okay, all right. So I thought he just deleted this particular tweet. Apparently, he deleted like a whole host of tweets in 6 months, which I find pretty cowardly. If you're going to go and just delete your old tweets, it's kind of like, I want to whitewash the memory of whatever I said. It's only going to, put more focus on stuff like that you were completely wrong about. Like, not true. Research for 2.0 is basically finished now. Testers coming in a couple months, as I have been told. This was January 30th, 2019. The specifics of Ethereum 2.0 are still being debated about 10 months later. So, this is I mean, he's lied about a lot of things, and it's not necessarily malicious. I think it's more incompetence than malice. But essentially, this guy, like the Ethereum community, just can't keep promises, and they just keep putting their hope on the next thing and so on. That was the point of my tweet. The best learning tools are consequences of your own actions. Unfortunately, most people would rather appeal to compassion to be bailed out. Bitcoin fixes this. And this is something that I've been thinking a lot about. It's that, when you take an action, the best learning that you're going to get is if you suffer the consequences of that action. If you don't put on a seatbelt and you get into an accident and get a pretty bad injury or something like that, that's not fatal, you're going to put on a seatbelt from then on, because you're going to know the consequences of that action. Financially, this is especially important because oftentimes people spend on things that they shouldn't. Suffering the consequences of that is part of the learning. Unfortunately, in an act of compassion, a lot of people tend to want to bail them out of this stuff. And this leads to sort of codependency cycles and so on, which is so common in the world today. And that's essentially what I'm pointing out in the tweet, is that, Bitcoin can fix stuff like that. And, sadly, that wasn't a very popular tweet, but it's something that I pointed out. All right. Today, I learned Gall's law. It states that complex systems that work are evolved from simple systems that work. In other words, complex systems are not designed. This is why every ICO blockchain project is bound to fail. Here's the big thing. When you have a complex system, the assumption oftentimes is that this is something that was designed, and that's not the case. And this is part of Gall's law. Complex systems are incredibly complex, and I'm using it in sort of like the mathematical term here. It's essentially a very difficult nonlinear system, and that means that a small change in input changes the outputs in unexpected ways, and so on. And that's the thing about complex systems, is that they are incredibly difficult to design because small changes in the initial conditions tend to change everything in the end. And and this is why it's extremely difficult to design incentive systems and so on. And this is the hubris of every ICO and blockchain project that I've seen, is that they are trying to design very complicated systems with very complicated incentives and so on. Especially the ones with any sort of smart contract with oracles and so on. It gets incredibly complex very, very quickly because, well, you can't trust an oracle. You have to make sure that it's like 2 of 3, blah, blah, blah. But what if, how do you make sure that it's not Sybilable and all that? It's bound to fail, because almost all complex systems, according to Gall's law, start as simple systems that work. So you essentially, if you want to have any chance of succeeding, you start as a simple system, and then you add layers of complexity onto that as market demand happens. But that's not at all how ICOs and blockchain systems actually work, and that's a sad reality of all of these things, and that's what I'm pointing out in that tweet. Anyway, that's it for my tweets. Let me see if there are any questions. Well, let me go to the Little Bitcoin book on Amazon. It's $11.39 for paperback, $8.99 for Kindle. We also have Programming Blockchain, Programming Bitcoin. This is available on Amazon as well. But other than that, yeah, let's see if there are any questions. Let's see. Can you elaborate on the impact of quantum computing and BTC if there is any concern in the near term, 5 years or so? You know, I saw a cartoon not too far back that was really on point about quantum computing. And the thing is, there's sort of like a mythology around quantum computing that's been built up. People think that you can massively parallelize computation through, qubits or something like that. That because it's a superposition of 0 and 1, that you're actually doing the calculations of 0 and 1 at the same time. That's not how it works. That's and anyone that sort of gives you that impression doesn't really understand quantum computing. What it is that when you observe something, all of the states become deterministic. So each time you look at any of those, you're not doing, if you have like 200 qubits or something like that, you're not doing 2 to the 200th calculations. What you're doing is you have some quantum gate that and you have some result that you're looking at, and that's the only thing you're allowed to observe. Everything else will fall in line with the deterministic, kind of like Schrodinger's cat kind of thing. If the cat is dead, then the bullet must have fired, that sort of thing. Like you can go back and look at everything else. It's not doing that. That's not how quantum computing works, and that's unfortunately the impression that a lot of people have. Now, there's a really good Saturday morning breakfast cereal cartoon. Let me see. Cartoon quantum computing. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, there it is. All right, so let me put that back on the screen. And this is the talk, and it's talking about it's humorous because it's about like puberty or something like that, but actually so do you know what a qubit is? And it's like a superposition of 0 and 1. So you can, double the computation with each qubit. And it's like, I wish you wouldn't read those magazines. They're bad for children. Honey, I think you're old enough to know the truth about quantum mechanics. Quantum superposition, it doesn't mean 0 and 1 at the same time, at least not in the way you think. Blah, blah, blah. And I mean, it's a very long cartoon, but essentially, it's the quantum computing that you think it is. It's totally not it, right? Like adding qubits and so on. It's really about making it a little more efficient. And there's only like a few quantum algorithms that we know of. The one that we know is something called Shor's algorithm, which gives you a square root speed up. It's still not nearly enough to do it, right? And you have to do that on a quantum machine. If you think you understand quantum computing or the potential, you probably don't, is what I'm saying. And until you understand it, stop fudding people and saying Bitcoin's going to be ruined because of quantum computing. All right, let's see. Do you think it is necessary to understand Austrian economics to understand Bitcoin? To some degree, yeah. I mean, not Austrian econ, but just economics, period, or the economics of scarcity. And that's really only something that Austrian economics really covers. Or would that be the first thing you'd learn if you had to start today? Computer science or economics? I'd learn a little of both. I mean, you can read, Safeteen's book or something like that if you want to know more about the economics of Bitcoin, along with, something like the Little Bitcoin book to learn about the at least the popular conception of Bitcoin and so on. Thoughts on extension blocks? I mean, it's a soft fork that they're doing in Litecoin. We'll see what happens. They're trying to do it with Mimblewimble. I find it interesting though that after this many years, it's like let me go back. I think the Litecoin, it's like Litecoin Improvement Proposal 2. It's like they haven't had any original ideas of their own. I think, Improvement Proposal 1 was about naming the various like units of Litecoin. So like one Lite is like the same as like a Satoshi in Bitcoin or something like that. It's kind of stupid, I think. Anyway, the fact that they're going in that direction is sort of like a signal to the market, hey, we're doing something technically interesting. I'm not sure that that's the real reason for Litecoin's value. I suspect a lot of that has to do with Charlie marketing and the longevity that it's had, but who knows? Let's see. Yeah, whoever you are, future book, you are going to be hidden. All right. All right, so I think that's about it. Yeah, those are all of the questions. Thank you for watching. This has been another episode of Bitcoin Tech Talk. Hopefully, my rants help you in some way. This song is done.